Hello everyone, and welcome to my latest video. This will probably be one of my last Beasts of Bermuda videos for a minute, but that doesn't mean it's any less important, because I'm going to be talking about a particular build, which has gained a fair amount of traction recently. And since I've been maining that build since the Rex patch hit, I feel like I can give an outline as to how to pull it off, especially since its popularity has been growing, and I've gotten questions about it. JagRex. JagRex as a build is personally the most fun I've ever had in Beasts of Bermuda. It's kinda nutty how viable it is, despite being a very janky build and concept. One of the reasons I'm pushing this video out so quickly is because I wouldn't really be surprised if it's nerfed in the upcoming patches, so take advantage of it while you can. First, what even is JagRex? Let's start with the name. JagRex is short for Jaguar T-Rex, and I coined this term because it is a more accurate way to describe what the playstyle is. Many people have taken to calling it Aquarex, or Semi-Aquatic Rex, but I personally think that this isn't accurate. This build doesn't work the same as something like Aquamegalo. With Aquamegalo, you can live off the grid, out at sea, eat fish, vibe, you know. This is not what JagRex does. As an outright aquatic build, Tyrannosaurus does not work. It's still a T-Rex, so you're stiff as hell when swimming, and you're way too big to sustain off a fish reliably. So what does JagRex do? The goal with JagRex is not to become semi-aquatic. Instead of having the ocean as a way of life, think of it as just another part of your Rex's toolkit. JagRex turns one of the few things Rexes usually avoid into a powerful weapon that they are primed to take advantage of whenever they can. So to get an understanding of the playstyle, let me do a rundown on how to think as JagRex. First, the playstyle doesn't initially come off as that different from typical Rex gameplay. You're still going to be combing around, looking for food, stalking and killing prey, like usual. Don't obsess over swimming around. Using the water at the appropriate times, not all the time, is key to JagRex gameplay. And this mindset of knowing when to use it is key. So when should you be using water? Here are a few of the most common scenarios. Life could be a dream. One of the biggest draws to JagRex is how it allows you to avoid situations that you may otherwise have difficulty dealing with. Other Rexes and Megalopacks can be very difficult for Rexes to deal with, especially alone. However, JagRex allows you to just swim away from them. 9 times out of 10, they won't follow you. And even if they do, you can just swim away from them. Be careful if the Rexes are aquatic themselves though. It depends on the situation obviously, but as JagRex, it's rare that I'm farther than a 30-second run from the ocean. Going inland with JagRex can be extremely dangerous if caught off guard, although still not impossible. As a JagRex, water is no longer an obstacle. If you see a landmass, you can probably go to it. This is very useful for getting to hard to reach places and for escaping danger. As a JagRex, suddenly all those herbivores on Lurdu Island are a perfectly reasonable option. And when you get there, and they all get pissed and start chasing you down after you kill one of their friends, you can just be like, Lamal, see ya, and swim over to the next continent. I had to put a disclaimer over this strategy though, because the main reason why I think it's viable right now is because of how dead the aquatic player base is. If there were more of them around, then this would be a lot more dangerous. And it's probably one of the easiest ways to die as a JagRex. Know the server you are on, and weigh your options accordingly. Probably my favorite part about JagRex is how it allows you to use water to conceal your approach. Stealth as Tyrannosaurus can be tricky, because you are big, loud, and scent works against you. Water takes all of these issues and throws them out the window. There have been plenty of situations where I see a target, but I don't really have cover to get within striking range, except for the lake, river, or coastline that they are next to. Given you make sure to swim under the surface, they will not see or hear you coming for the most part, and they definitely won't smell you because you don't give off scent while swimming. It also has that surprise factor, since people don't expect a fucking T-Rex to come out of the water like a Moza or Chrono. While definitely not a requirement to the JagRex hunting strategy, if you can take advantage of water while hunting or fighting, do so. If you fail to catch a target in the initial attack, driving them into water is the best way to finish the job. Among the terrestrial creatures in Beasts of Bermuda, There is nothing faster in the water than JagRex. Remember that. You also do the most damage in water, so never be afraid to scrap in the water under the majority of circumstances. Even Moza and Chrono can't beat you in a straight up brawl fest. You are the shit, and in the water, they will have to respect your power or die. Now that you understand how JagRex works, we can get to the elephant in the room, the talent tree. This is probably where I get the most questions. What do you spec into in order to become this JagRex? Well, here it is. You should strive for the maximum aquatic affinity and weather resistance, and then at minimum 2 out of 3 in the power tree from strong lungs up to brawler and sharp teeth. I say at minimum because given you get to 2 out of 3 in the power tree, you should strive at that point to max out those talents before moving on to new ones. These are the fundamentals. I have never got to 1.3 or bigger as JagRex, so there's definitely room for experimentation from better Rex players. Let's go over each of the talents individually. As soon as you spawn, you should be maxing out Aqua Affinity. Aqua Affinity is what makes a Rex a JagRex, and it will really help you early on for getting around and staying out of trouble. It turns the comfort decrease from being in the ocean from powerful to negligible, and when you become adult you can just chill out in the open sea with no problems at all. Next, you should be maxing out Weather Resistance. Weather Resistance is sometimes seen as a more situational talent, but since you will be hanging around coastal areas, that means you'll be more exposed to storms and flooding more than the typical Rex player. I do think Weather Resistance is a very important talent. It saved my hide many times. Now we're moving on to the power tree. Strong Lungs is pretty straightforward as to why it'd be important on a more aquatic build. What is drowning, am I right? Out of Element is extremely important for the JagRex build. Giving you more damage when in water, you'd have to be a fool to not max this out. It's what turns JagRex from amusing to actually terrifying. Persistence and Stoic aren't exactly the most important talents for the JagRex build, but they are still good talents. It's not like you're wasting talent points getting to Brawler and Sharp Teeth. Brawler and Sharp Teeth are the most important combat talents to spec into as JagRex. Brawler means more damage, duh, you're going to want it. And then Sharp Teeth gives you more damage on bigger targets, which for JagRex means more damage against Moza and Krona, your two biggest enemies aside from other Rexes. These next set of talents are ones that you should probably look into after maxing out the main ones. These recommended talents from here on out aren't really in any order of importance, so just spec into the ones you think might be good for you. Adrenaline means more damage when low on health. This is the one I personally go into next because it could save me in a pinch. Thick Hide is one of the most important damage resistant talents, although I'd argue on JagRex it's not a must-have, since you'll mostly be hunting in the big leagues. However, Thick Hide will definitely help you in dealing with the annoying Elasmos, Megalos, and Flyers that you'll come across. Bruiser is another obviously good talent for Rex, especially so in the case of JagRex because it can stop aquatics and semi-aquatics from swimming away from you. Unbreakable is very useful for giving you some form of injury resistance, which is JagRex's biggest weakness in the Chrono matchup. I'll also leave a note for Sneaky, because stealth can be pretty important for JagRex, and it can also help for making your breathing and splashing less noticeable when approaching from the water. I've personally never felt like I need Sneaky, but if you feel like it can help you, then go for it. These last two talents are ones that I can see being useful for JagRex, but they are so far off in the talent tree that they aren't too practical to work into the build. I'd save these two for when you're maxed out in every other talent we talked about so far. First is Strong Legs. This talent can really help you in lunging out of the water to attack prey on land, since the initial steepness of the shore will probably give your prey some time otherwise. There is also Nimble-Footed. As a Rex, your turn is easily your biggest weakness, so this talent can help you to mitigate that. Now for matchups. When initially trying to write this section, I was going to divide it into good matchups and counters/checks or bad matchups, but I realized that it's a lot more complicated than that. There are a few things that straight up counter JagRex, and there are a few things that JagRex straight up counters. So instead, I'll just be talking about all the creatures individually. Velos and Oris can be annoying at times, but you're a T-Rex, so you shouldn't really be worrying about them to begin with. You want bigger game. Flyers and Megs make for good meals when you can get them, but they can also be your biggest annoyances if they catch you away from the water, so be careful. Paras are probably a JagRex's safest option in terms of targets. They're meaty, and will usually not want to fight you unless they are big or in a group. With me, the biggest issue has always been catching them rather than fighting them. Rexes didn't have the best matchup against Apados to begin with, and JagRex doesn't change that. Small Apados are always tasty, and you could always try to tackle lone adults if you're confident, but otherwise I just say to leave them alone. The JagRex build is particularly vulnerable to injury, so I would beware of Packies in size. Packies are good food when you can catch them, but I'd be careful if they decide to fight back. They're unlikely to kill you outright because you have Stoic, but they could soften you up and slow you down for the paras in size to finish you. Cychania in general is just a powerhouse that exploits the fact that you got little in the way of damage resistance. I've personally always left size alone, so I'll be leaving it up to the person ballsy enough to fight them to find out if it isn't a bad matchup. Other Rexes are easily your biggest danger on land. I'd recommend that you avoid most other Rexes at all cost, mostly because they are the only things that can catch and overpower you consistently. For example, if anything decides to follow you in the water, it's these guys. You can go for smaller Rexes and loners, but I'd still be very careful when you do. I personally don't have good matchup experience against Acro because they are very rare where I play, but I can see them being similar to other Rexes except way less threatening. They are slower, weaker, and worse in the water than you are. I'd just be careful about Acro groups. You might be surprised to find that JagRex does not have the best matchup against aquatics and semi-aquatics. Sure, you may be a more aquatic Rex than most, but you merely adopted the sea. They are born in it, molded by it, which means that even with this build, they can be tricky to deal with. Their far superior aquatic mobility means that for the most part, unless you catch them in a restricted space, they're only going to fight you on their terms. This is especially the case for Elasmo, Ichthy, and Lurdu. These guys are unlikely to kill you, but unless you catch them unawares, you probably aren't going to be eating them that often. They're just too fast. Meanwhile, Moza and Chrono are the big boys. As your biggest enemies aside from other Rexes, they are the ultimate test. These two are the primary reasons why JagRex's talent tree is how it is. JagRex doesn't need most speed talents, since it can use the water to avoid its problems. So it comes down to power and survival. Which of these two is better suited to dealing with Chrono and Moza? The answer is power. Rex just does not need survival talents in order to deal with them. Chronos can be scary with their injury damage, but they can't just outmuscle a power Rex, and your default health will be enough to tank them anyway. As for Moses, they don't use their strength to bring down their prey. They prefer to drown them instead. This is why fighting them off you is more important than just tanking them. The matchup with these two depends on the environment more often than most. If you catch them in a shallow reef, or in lakes where they're waiting to ambush things, you can just pull the Uno reverse card on them and jump in there. They ain't gonna win against you in close quarters unless they have you vastly outnumbered. By contrast, both of these guys can be trouble in more open water. Once they realize that they need to play smart with you, the fight becomes a lot harder, because they'll be seeking to exploit your bad swimming turn radius and ass ride you rather than fight you head on. Chronos in this regard are easier to deal with because it's bigger, slower, doesn't turn as good, and you can get to land easier. Moses on the other hand can exploit this rather easily, especially in combination with their grab. While they can't really drown you with the grab, they can easily drag you into open water where you'll struggle to defend yourself. All these factors together show that while JagRex is definitely strong in a lot of areas, it's not downright overpowered. I just see it as a fun alternative that I've really enjoyed playing. I have a feeling JagRex will become less viable in the future, due to the likelihood of Rex's swimming getting nerfed, and one of the big reasons why Rex can rely on water so much is because there's not a lot of aquatics around. If the aquatic player base rises up, then JagRex will have a much harder time. I hope you guys found this helpful, and if you want to try the playstyle, this is the best time to do it. I was going to have JagRex footage after this guide, but given this video's length, I'm going to save that for the next video. I didn't expect it to be this long, but I really enjoyed making it, and I'm considering this good practice for later projects. I hope you all enjoyed, and I'll see you next time. Goodbye everyone.